Greetings, Rabbi Griscott here with your weekly Shabbat sermon for the Parsha of Emor. So I like to quote all the funny jokes and memes that I see related to the pandemic, and there was one this past week that gave me a good chuckle, related to my favorite artistic image in the world, the image at the center, the top of the roof of the Sistine Chapel, that image of God reaching out to Adam, and their fingers are almost touching. A really moving spiritual image, I find, of how God and man try to connect with each other. They come so close and their fingers aren't quite touching. That famous image at the Sistine Chapel. Now, it's one of our Jewish principles of faith that we don't believe God actually has a body, so you have to understand this image as being a metaphorical one, of course. But in any case, someone sent out a meme of, that image of the Sistine Chapel of God and man touching, but with a police officer behind them writing them a ticket for not social distancing. That really made me laugh because the jarring juxtaposition of the beauty of that artistic image with the cop writing them a ticket is just speaks so much about the absurd time that we're living through. That's how I would put it. Now, of course, you can make all sorts of rabbinic homilies about how man and God do not have to social distance from each other, only man from man, but that's not actually the route I'm going on today. The Parsha tomorrow discusses all of the holidays. It has a list called Parshat HaMoadim, and we do indeed read from this Torah portion also on certain Yom Tov days. But it lists them all in order, starting with Pesach. Pesach comes in the first month, even though Rosh Hashanah is the beginning of the year. Nisan is considered to be the first of months when you're counting months. So Pesach, the Omer, that's the period we're currently in. It mentions Shavuos, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, and Shmini Atzeres. And that is a listing of all the holidays. Now, after that's done, it says, "Vaydaber Moshe ad Moadei Adonai el bnei Yisrael," and Moses declared the appointed festivals of Hashem to the children of Israel, and that's the end of that list. And then you go to chapter 24, which has new commandments. But there are some who find an allusion to two other holidays in that new chapter. So, coincidentally and amazingly, what is the very next commandment after the listing of the holidays? "Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe Emor," God commanded Moses, saying, "Savet b'nei Israel v'yikchu elecha shemen zayit zach kasis lamaor lahalos ner tamid." Command the children of Israel that they take to you clear olive oil pressed for lighting to kindle a continual lamp. The mitzvah of lighting the menorah, which was operative every night in the temple, the menorah burned all night, every night, a continual lamp. So there are those who say, this is an allusion to Hanukkah being tacked on after the regular Torah holidays, because Hanukkah and Purim are the two, and we'll get to Purim in a moment. Hanukkah and Purim are the two holidays that came after the Torah, the five books of Moses. So here is an allusion, a hint encoded into the Torah that Hanukkah would be tacked on to the holidays, because after the list of the holidays is a commandment to light the menorah. All right, cute and clever. Where's the allusion to Purim? That comes right after. And this is a little bit more tenuous, but the very next mitzvah after the menorah is the mitzvah of the showbread, that you have to have 12 loaves of bread in the temple on the shulchan, on the table. And this is sort of a symbolic feast for God that is there for God at all times. Well, that's an allusion to Purim, because Purim is the ultimate holiday of mishteh, of feasting and drinking. And indeed, Purim was actually the last time we were all together in most shuls, including in our shul all around the country. We had a big Purim bash, and then I believe that Shabbos already, shuls were closing. And it's amazing how the world changed so quickly. But Purim, we were feasting as if we didn't know what was going on, and then within a few days it became clear that you got to shut down the shuls. Anyway, whenever you see these so-called Bible codes and things alluded to in the text, you can take it as being significant, or you could see it as just something cute that somebody found. But in any case, the holiday that nobody even bothers trying to find an allusion to in the text is the one coming up next week, Monday night and Tuesday, and that is Lag BaOmer. So we found an allusion to Hanukkah, we found an allusion to Purim, but nobody bothers finding an allusion to Lag BaOmer, and that's because it's really the most minor of all holidays that we have. It's kind of a mystery, actually. What is Lag BaOmer? Why do we even celebrate on that day, the 33rd day of the Omer? There's like 10 different opinions, and whenever you have that many opinions, none of them are really authoritative, and nobody knows why it's a holiday. But it's a minor holiday, and in Israel they have big bonfires. Not this year; they said you can't go out and congregate because of the pandemic. But it has something to do with Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, the great student of Rabbi Akiva, who revealed the Zohar, the great mystical text of the Kabbalah of Jewish mysticism, to the world, perhaps on the 33rd day of the Omer. But again, it's sort of unclear why it's such a holiday. I myself favor the following explanation, which I think relates not to any historical event that happened on it, but on something sort of intuitive that came from within the Jewish soul. So, first, an introduction to that idea. There's a statement, Minhag Yisrael Torahi. The customs of the Jewish people are Torah themselves, and indeed perhaps the highest level of Torah. And why is custom so powerful and so profound? Because it comes from the bottom up, right? Most commandments come from the top down. God or the rabbis or some authority commanded that you have to do this thing. When something is a minhag, when something is a custom, you could see it as a rising from deep within the Jewish soul itself, or from deep within the subconscious of the human being. And that makes it more sacred and more real because it comes from inside the human soul. And the very fact that it defies explanation, that makes it the most sacred of all. And we could say the same thing about Lag BaOmer. I think there's something intuitive about celebrating on that date, and I think that is as follows. The period of the Omer became a period of mourning and of sadness. There are also different reasons for that. But here's the reason, psychological reason that I favor. Any period of transition is fraught with anxiety. Between Pesach and Shavuos, we're told to count 7 weeks until Shavuos. Well, that's from the liberation of the Exodus until the date that we receive the Torah. And when you're in between and you're neither here and there, that's fraught with anxiety. And so it became a period of mourning in the sense of a period of introspection and a period of self denial. But Jews don't like to be mourning and to be in sadness for too long. When you get to the 33rd day of the Omer, that's about 2/3 of the way through the Omer. And at some point, the Jewish people decided, we're not going to be sad and we're not going to be anxious for 7 weeks. That is absurd and that is not Jewish. We're going to enact that idea for 2/3 for most of the way there. But by the time you get 2/3 of the way through the Omer, you could see the light at the end of the tunnel. You can see Shavuos, which is our goal. And we're going to start celebrating life instead of mourning. We're looking forward instead of looking back. And I think there's a hint to that in the writings of my ancestor, the Bnei Yissaschar, Rabbi Hirsch Melech of Dinov, the forebear of Munkach Chasidus. He writes that there are 17 days from Lag BaOmer until Shavuos, and the gematria, the numerical value of 17, is that of the word tov, which is good. The first time the word tov is used in the Torah, it is in connection with the light that God created on the first day of creation. Vayar et ha'or ki tov. And God saw the light that it was good. And the light that God created on the first day was a spiritual light because the sun was not created until the fourth day. This light of the first day was the Or HaGanuz, the special light that is hidden for the righteous, and that is to be found in the revelation of the Torah. So you see the brilliance of his connections of numerical values. So therefore, he says, what happens on Lag BaOmer when you have 17 days, when you have Tov days, good days until Shavuos, which corresponds to Or, light, which corresponds to Torah, is on Lag BaOmer, you can start to perceive literally the light at the end of the tunnel. The light of Ma'amad Har Sinai, the light of the revelation of Mount Sinai begins to shine backwards until Lag BaOmer, until it increases every day, until you get to Shavuos. But he associates that with the light at the end of the tunnel. And that has negative connotations, that term, with the Vietnam War. I was watching Ken Burns's 10-part documentary about Vietnam, and American military commanders kept saying, we see the light at the end of the tunnel, and that's become a cynical expression that when you're just inventing optimism and it's not really there. But if we use it in a truly optimistic way, I think the connection to this pandemic is obvious. We're starting to think, the governor of Kansas just put out this phased plan of how are we going to re-enter life, and the rabbis in our rabbinical association are starting to discuss that. And we're realizing that shul is not going to be quite the same. I had originally assumed we're going to go from staying at home, and then it's going to be lifted, and we're going to go back exactly to the way things were before. And I'm slowly starting to internalize it looks like it's not going to be that way. There's going to be a transitional period in between, similar to the Omer is a transitional period. And transitional periods are fraught with anxiety inherently. The crowd size is going to be smaller. First, maybe 30 people allowed to congregate with social distancing, with masks on, with deep cleaning of the space, with contact tracing, which means you have to take everyone's name and phone number who's going to be there at the service so that you can contact them after if, God forbid, they were to get infected or infect somebody else. Then the numbers will go up to 90 people allowed, and so on and so forth. We're already looking to the high holidays, the rabbis of the community. What are the high holidays going to look like this year? But I think we should stop mourning and stop the sadness of this pandemic and start looking to the lesson of Lag BaOmer, which is that at a certain point, You have to look to the light at the end of the tunnel, even when you're still in a transitional phase, and look with optimism toward the future and say, we are going to look forward instead of continuing to remain in a state of anxiety, which is perhaps appropriate for a few weeks, but it's un-Jewish to say to stay sad and in mourning for too long. I believe that's the lesson of Lag BaOmer, and that's a lesson for all of us indeed. And with that in mind, I hope to see everyone in shul in some form soon enough, and stay tuned for news about that. I wish everyone a Shabbat Shalom, a peaceful and restful Shabbat.